Hi everybody, it's good to see you again. This is your pre-cal 40S videos. We're going to look at 1.3, which we're going to be combining the transformations now. So far we've done vertical and horizontal translations. We've also done reflections and stretches and compressions. So we're going to put it together now in a couple of questions. So if you want to have a look at this question here, you notice that we are given x squared above, and there has been some transformations that have gone on. So what we see here, we see a -2. What this does is it multiplies the y values by -1, and it also multiplies those y values by a factor of 2. So everything kind of stretches. So if you notice here, we had our okay, and then what happens is we have our horizontal translation. So this moves right 1 unit, and this +3 moves up 3 units. Okay, so it's important to remember order of operations do apply those rules. So we're going to start from the left and we're going to work towards the right and do it in that order. Okay, so just so that you have it in words, what's happened on this graph of our x squared is we've reflected over the x-axis. That was our negative value for the a, so that's what that negative does. And then we have a vertical stretch factor of 2, so all of your y values get doubled. They get multiplied by 2. And then you end up shifting 1 unit to the right, so that's from that 1 right there. And finally we shift up 3 units, so that comes from our +3. All right, so now we have our change on y equals x squared, and above, just above on the paper, we were given this, right? So that's what the change looks like when it's done on x squared. Now, just so that you see the difference of what it looks like when the change is made on f of x, we write it like this, with our -2, and then we have our f, and then where we have our of x part, we're going to have x minus 1 and +3. So I just want you to notice the subtle differences here, okay? So we've got our f of x notation in this one, and we've got our x squared notation in this one. So you see here how we have the square, and this we don't, because it's assumed that f of x is x squared. So that's how it would be written. All right, so now order is important, and just to restate what we just did, but in general terms, we want to work left to right. If a is negative, then we reflect over the x-axis, and the vertical stretch is a factor of the absolute value of a. If b is negative, so that's right there, we reflect over the y-axis, and the horizontal stretch factor is of 1 over the absolute value of b. For h, that's right there, that tells us a horizontal translation, either left or right, and remember the movement is opposite to the connecting sign. So if this is a negative, then we move to the right. If this is a positive, then we move to the left. And our vertical translation moves k units up or down. So that's just whatever you see is what you get. Now for these two examples here, we're given the graph of f of x. So what we're going to do is we're going to see two different examples. So let's do this one first. Over here, what this 2 does right here is it multiplies our y values by 2. So anything that we have here, so let's say this is y equals -1. Let me move this down so you can see it better. So here, this is where our original is. We're going to multiply that by 2, so that's going to give us a negative 2. This isn't y equals negative 1, that becomes y equals negative 2. This is y equals 1. We're going to make that y equals positive 2. And this is y equals 0, which stays the same, so that doesn't change for now. Now what happens next is we apply this next transformation. So we move 1 unit down. Okay, so all of these points here now go down 1 unit. And so then I'm going to put a big dot where I have my final values. Okay, and that's what I want to draw in as my graph. And that's what we end up looking. And over here, you'll see I've got the mapping notation. So my x and y, they go through a change. Well, the x doesn't change, the y values, they get doubled and they get moved down 1. All right, now looking at our next example here, I've got this negative. What this negative does is it flips over the x-axis. So all of my y values now change from positive to negative and vice versa. Alright, so now here I've got y equals negative 1. That's going to become a positive 1. This is going to be positive 1. This positive 1 is now going to be a negative 1, and this stays the same. What happens with this guy is everything is moved over right 2 units. So I take all of these points, and you know what, I'm going to change writing utensils. I'm going to go over 2, and it's going to be here. I'm going to take that x, and I'm going to move it over 2 units over here. I'm going to put a big circle there. Okay, I'm going to take this, and it's going to go over 2 units, and I'm going to put a big circle there, and this ends up being over here. So now it's the circles that I'm connecting to each other. I'm going to erase this so that it doesn't look like it's a part of my answer. And that's always a good idea, is if something might look like it be a part of the answer, just erase it so that it looks clear to the marker. Oh, sorry. Okay, and there you have it at the bottom here is the mapping notation for that one. So we've got from y to x, we add 2 to our x's, and we multiply all of our y's by a negative 1. Okay? All right, let's go to the next question. So in these questions right here, oh, you can't see it yet. There you go. That's better. This looks, it's not in the form that we want it to. What we have to do for question C is we have to factor out the 2 before transforming the graph. So if you recall factoring, it would be something like that. Okay, so you take this 2x plus 2 and factor it so that you've separated into the b and then the x plus a number in a bracket. So this is what we're actually going to work with here now, is y equals f of 2 bracket x plus 1 close bracket. All right, so now we could look at the transformation in its pieces. So here, this is our b value. When our b value is 2, we multiply our x values by 1 over 2. And then what happens? Our h value is negative 1, so we shift over 1 to the left. Okay. Now, just so that we're clear, this is all for C. Okay. All right. I'll just write the equation here so that there's no confusion. All right. So I'm going to work for part C on this graph right here. So let's take all our values. So if I take my x value, which is 3, and then I divide it by 2, it becomes 1.5, so I'm somewhere here. If I take this x value as 2 and I divide it by 2, so it ends up here. I take this 1, that becomes a half. This 0 stays a 0, and then this -1 becomes a half. So everything is being squished. This 2 becomes a 1. So you can see that this is compressed. It's squishing it. It's making it go like this. All right. Now I take all of these points and I move them over 1 unit to the left. So we're going to have this go over here, this go over here, this one goes over here, and this one goes over here. So you can see that my graph now looks like a squished version of the previous shifted over 1 unit. Okay? All right. Now let's look over to part D. So part D was this. So y equals f of -x plus 1, close my bracket over there. And what we do for this one first is we're going to multiply all the x values by -1. So that's flipping over the y-axis. So basically we're just going to take that, put it here, this goes here, this stays, this goes here, this goes here. All right? And now we're going to move everything over, or sorry, up 1 unit. So this goes up, up 1 unit, and up 1 unit. Sorry, this needs to go up 1 unit as well. Okay, so now I've got this here, here. And so you want to make sure that you're maintaining the correct shape just so that you're doing everything correctly. I should use a ruler, but I'm not. Okay, so there you go. That's your graph of D. Okay, so a couple of important things to remember is when you have a question that it has, well, you see right here you've got a -x, you've got a number right next to the x. It's always a good idea to factor first. So factor it out, and then you can describe the transformation. So we're going to end up with -3 f of -x, put a bracket there, and then factor that negative out, so we end up with -1 in there. Now we can describe what is actually happening. Okay, so this negative is a reflection over the x-axis, and it's a vertical stretch by a factor of 3. Okay, then this negative here, this is a reflection over the y-axis. And then we have our h value. That is a horizontal translation of 1 unit to the right. And finally, we have a vertical translation of 4 units up. All right, so remember, factor first, and then you simply can just go left to right and list them in order. It's important that you list them in order. All right, so there's some homework questions for you. Good luck. Have fun doing the exercises, and we'll do the inverse of a relation next. See ya.